Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to today's episode of Talking Points. I'm your host, Syed Niaz Ahmed. Today in our studio, we have a very distinguished person, a Bangladeshi, born British, living in London, and he has produced so many films for the mainstream media here in this country, and he is currently engaged in producing an epic film which we'll talk about later. Welcome to the show, Mr. Ruhul Amin. How are you today?
Thank you, I'm fine. Thank you.
It's a great pleasure to have you here, and I'm so happy that you could make it today despite your very busy schedule.
I'm very pleased.
Okay. Mr. Ruhul Amin, you have been busy making films in this country. You were born in Bangladesh, and you came to this country, you studied film making in this country. Could you, for the benefit of our viewers, share some of the thoughts that led you to this profession?
Basically what happens, it all started from my childhood. As a child, because I was living in Sylhet town, and it's extremely naturally beautiful nature. It was a diverse community there, a lot of cultural activity. So I grew up within that kind of environment. And I think at the age of 7, somehow I got very much attracted to the nature, which is sort of like tea garden. It's only 2 minutes walk from my home, just across the road.
Right.
So every morning we used to go to the tea garden.
Where was that in Sylhet?
That is Sylhet town, Shahidgarh. And the tea garden is nearby. Then all these Manipuri community, diverse, kind of very colorful, very kind of cultured community. Music is there, theater is there, the cinema, 3 little cinema. We used to go to the cinema with the film. So all that kind of influences kind of attracted me. And somehow, I think naturally I was kind of artistically kind of sensitive. So I took a kind of cinema, theater and nature in a great kind of, I had a great sensibility towards nature basically, and also the pieces of artwork and cinema which I saw.
You looked at nature and you wanted to record it through the lens.
Not exactly. Let me kind of add how exactly happened.
Right.
So at that time, at the age of 7, I got very much involved with the nature and kind of loved all these every kind of cultural activities. And then obviously it's next to my home, which is tea garden.
Right.
And of course, there are 2 different kind of communities in tea garden. Uriya and some people from Madhya Pradesh, they used to work, which is sort of like a
They've been working for generations.
For generations, kind of British brought them. So there was a kind of a derogatory name for them, which is Kuli. And whenever I was a little bit naughty, my mother used to say, I'll send you tea garden.
Yes.
And you have to kind of stay with the coolies, because you are running around and you are kind of...
The concept of coolie is like a porter, isn't it?
It is, But it's in our country, I mean, of course, the British gave that name, but in our community, it was a derogatory name. And the little girl from the tea garden used to come every morning, kind of deliver the milk and everything, but she never stepped into the house. So all that, the question as a little boy...
Was it the cultural barrier, or was it something to do with religion?
It's nothing to do with religion, it's cultural barrier, it's the class, I suppose, yeah. So we were sort of like the lower middle class Bengali babus, kind of, and so a coolie couldn't enter your home. So basically, that kind of started, I started querying why this little girl in a half an hour, sitting there and asking for a ma doodh, nobody's kind of looking at. And I asked my mother, what is this, why she can, everybody started laughing.
But you use the milk that she brings in.
Yes, of course, yeah, of course.
That's not bad.
So, you see, that kind of, as a child, it gave me something to think about, and then why everybody hated coolies. So I discovered basically tea garden, and I discovered that community, how beautiful people, and the cleanliness, they have a small garden and all that. So at the same time, I got very much interested in films, and I think I saw a film called Sutorang, done by Subhash Dutta. It's a wonderful film. As a child, I didn't really understand the language of...
He was an established actor, and then he produced
the film, yeah. And he became a great filmmaker. Yes. And also he was a very well-known actor in Bangladesh.
Yes.
And at the same time, I did watch many other films, but particularly Sutorang attracted me. Now if I look back and say why, because I done kind of study film in this country, I analyze and everything. And now I see it was a great masterpiece. The reason for attraction, I think it's partly do with the lyricism and the poetry. So what I can see there is a connection. At the same time, I discovered the beauty of nature.
Right.
I discovered, and also partly the humanity. So I discovered, the different position of the communities within our society, and the humiliation, sort of like the lower classes, the coolie and all these other, kind of everybody kind of used to kind of talk about, derogatory name, and at the same time love for the nature.
Right.
All kind of gave me a great kind of a subject to
What
think
sort of
about.
age frame were you in?
At
when you
that time I was age of 7. But
that was a lot for a man of
Yeah.
7 or young boy of 7 to go through.
to go through. But without much understanding, I said when I went to tea garden and kind of for the first time I went into their home particularly because I was so scared. If my mother throws me out of home.
Were you allowed in their house?
Yes, yes, they were
They
delighted.
didn't ask you to stop at the threshold.
They are delighted. And what basically happened, I discovered again another beauty. Mostly attracted me the cleanliness.
Right.
I came back and I told my mother and everybody, why do you call coolie? Why do you have that kind of resentments to it?
Right.
Of course, everybody, they were also not serious. It's just a kind of
Right.
something to say, basically, to put you down. And as a child, I started thinking, if I could do a film on the life of those coolies, I could tell the world how beautiful people they are. So you see, there is a connection of nature and the humanity. And that somehow kind of gave me the
Why did you
greater-
think of making a film? Why didn't you think of writing? Why didn't you think of something else?
Because-
Writing a poet, or making a
because-
poem?
Because as a child, I think I was very kind of a visual person. So the nature and the visual
Did you have a camera back then?
attracted. No, not at that time. Not at that time. In fact, I wanted to buy one, but I wasn't allowed to buy a camera. Because that's it. You have to study and all that.
Right.
This is not the time to kind of go on and taking pictures and all that. But I was insisting I should buy a camera. So I think it's partly to do with my visual interest. Made me think, and also I fell greatly in love with the Bengali cinema because we used to see regularly what other films are shown.
Even at
and
that
all
age, at 7?
Yeah, because we used to go with the family.
With the family.
In those days, there was a kind of a culture of the local
Once
town
a week
that-
or something.
Yeah, once a week or once a fortnight that everybody from the family would go and watch the film. So it was a part of the culture.
The films were also see that you could enjoy with your family members rather than alone.
Exactly, and of course, in those days, wonderful Bengali movies, and I often talk about them.
Yes,
Sort of the masterpieces
as
were
you said,
produced.
the lyrics were nice, the story was nice, the direction was nice, the photography was nice, and everybody went, spent some money, enjoyed 3 hours and came home satisfied, you see?
Extremely satisfied, and not only that, they went to see a book. They used to go say, boi dekhe ashi. They used to see a book. So it's almost like an epic story.
Yes.
And a lot of entertainment. And it's not only that. If I look back, some of those masterpieces they produced, like Johir Rehan films, Subhash Dutto, Khanata, and there are many other filmmakers.
But most of the films, don't you agree, or perhaps not, that they are based on fantasies?
No, because what happens in those days, especially sort of like, I'm talking about when I saw it's a kind of little early 70s, yeah. But if you look at the films of the 60s, mid 60s, you will see social drama they used to call. But there used to be a wonderfully captured, Bengali life with the Bengali sentiment, their fantasy, of course, a lot of fantasies there, but at the same time, social values. And it's all interconnected with, people could relate easily. And as a result, they are kind of accepted by most of the people. And on top of that, of course, there are some kind of film which is to do with city lives and all that, but at the same time, there are a lot of films which is folk fantasy.
Right.
Set in middle, I think Arabian Nights and many other kind of Bengali folk stories. And
Ali Baba and 40 Thieves and Aladdin.
Aladdin and there are also films like Laili Majnu and many other kind of local folk stories. Folk stories were captured, and I think the folk music
like
also kind of well.
Rup Kanna and all that.
Patalpuri Rajkanna. It's a wonderful. I still remember. I think this is mostly,
Well, people enjoy this because fantasy. They want to forget their worries and and problems, see.
No, not only that, because that lot later, after liberation, they started making a lot of those films for people to worry their hardship. But if you look at those films in those days, it's not just kind of a pure escapism, not just fantasy. There were kind of social messages.
Right.
And wonderful, if you look at Neel Akasher Niche, if you look at Abuj Mon, and all those films were love stories, but at the same time, kind of a lot of kind of what is Bengaliness, what is our family, what is middle classes, what is lower middle classes values, and the relationship between people, the respect, everything was beautifully captured. If you see, even if you look at the film star of those days, Rahman Shabnam, Rajak Shabana, and then many other kind of what they used to call, these the stars of Bangladesh, even Rajak Koburi, and wonderful.
They've always had
stories.
the couple.
Yeah,
that would make or break a film.
Yeah, exactly. But I think it's not just to do with fantasy. Most of these films were extremely well done in terms of kind of reach people with some kind of messages.
Right.
And any film like Jivan Teke Neya,
Right.
serious
We'll
films
talk
are
about
made.
that, Mr. Amin. What really triggered you? I mean, you came over to this country later. Let's forget the age. But you came out to this country, you went to study film. I mean, what really triggered you to study film and go into it? In fact, I mean, being a person who perceived, who looked nature, who loved nature and all that, I think there comes a time in everybody's life that you like nature, see. But then there was something more than that, and that triggered you to go into this profession.
That is extremely kind of beautiful question you have asked. I mean, it is kind of that would possibly what I tell you,
Yep.
your question will kind of encapsulate everything. So basically what happened, that culminated, childhood kind of desire into an obsession. And that obsession kind of, I have to make film. And all the time, I often ask myself, since my childhood, I continued making film, still I'm making film, and dreaming of making bigger film.
Right.
What is that? And what is that motivation? What is that kind of spark kind of led me into this?
Yes.
Now, that is...
we are coming to the end of this segment, but probably we will not have enough time, but we'll continue with this discussion. But please go ahead, yes.
Yeah, so basically that obsession continued. I have to become a filmmaker. And I have to make wonderful films which would kind of represent or capture that notion of ideology which I thought about in my childhood. And partly to do with nature, the beauty of people. And of course, as I grew, I learned it through my studies, through my association in the community. After coming to England, went through extreme kind of time in terms of racism, street racism, and a lot of hardship. All that kind of taught me that I could make beautiful films talking about what is really what I have seen and understood.
Did you come so close to like this, you said mugging and racism, did you come so close?
Not only close, I was kind of, there was a youth in the East End of London, as you know. We were victims of racism.
Okay, Mr. Amin, we'll come back and we'll talk about this later in the second segment. Thank you very much, viewers, for being with us, and don't go away, we'll be back soon. Thank you.
আপনারা দেখছেন টকিং পয়েন্ট। আপনারা দেখছেন টকিং পয়েন্ট।
Welcome back. Before the break, we were talking with our distinguished guest today, Mr. Amin, about his filmmaking career. Yes, Mr. Amin, we were talking about what really triggered you. You came out to this country and then you worked in the British film industry, and then later you decided that you should join the British Film and Television Institutes, right?
Yes, but let me just add, when I, in the early 70s, I ended up in East London.
Right.
It was an extremely volatile part of the country, because of the racism, and
Right.
as a little boy,
Right.
and we couldn't go beyond 1 square mile.
Mm-hmm.
So basically all the youth, we formed kind of protesting against the racism, and a lot of protest
Was
and
it
all
like
that.
a vigilante group?
Yes, I wouldn't call ourselves a vigilante, but it's kind of protecting your own community.
Mm-hmm.
We started doing martial art and formed a community organization.
Mm-hmm.
The first, one of the first youth organization is called Progressive Youth Organization.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, at the same time, other parallel organizations mushroomed like Youth Movement and Youth Approach and many other organizations in the East End. So
Yeah, but what was the main intention of those
the
organizations?
intention to get all these people together, but in those days those organizations were partly youth activities,
Right.
means kind of getting youth together and some kind of pleasure tip and that kind of thing.
Right,
That was mainly.
that's it.
But at the same time we are doing martial art,
Right.
practicing martial art to protect ourselves.
Right.
Then slowly kind of awareness kind of grew, and then political protest.
Right.
Some of us became kind of a local politician.
Right.
So all that kind of form and protest were going, but I didn't for a single moment gave up my film interest.
Right.
While all this happening, I started kind of running around with a small camera. I went to the dog market in those days. There was a beautiful eastern market, and a part of the market used to call dog market, and I bought a small camera for £5, kind of a movie camera, and I started filming, and so all that kind of, I was continuously kind of kept my dream of filmmaking alive. As all these things happening, I came out of school, and then straight away I went to the British film industry.
Right.
Worked as a trainee for many years, became a film editor, and also kind of started learning all these other aspects of filmmaking.
Right, right.
But at the same time, of course, I had a great kind of interest to pursue my further education. I went to the evening colleges, done other degrees on, as a certain subject, like English literature, philosophy, sociology, and photography. I continued. And then as I kind of started working in industry, I also made 2 documentaries.
This photography was cinematography.
Still photography.
Still
Firstly, I
photography.
started still photography. While I was doing that, also I found a film workshop in East London at that time on Bethnal Green Road called Four Corner Cinema Hall. And in Four Corner, I also started attending, and there were a kind of 4 professional filmmakers. So I was very fortunate to kind of to become part of the Four Corner, and also
Right.
kind of film appreciation. I was part of that group, and also they are making some small films.
Well, we'll cut the long story short, and we'll come to your career starting making films,
Yes.
Because
So-
we want to share with our viewers
Yes. So
some of the clips that you have very kindly given us.
yes, I personally made independently about 15 films.
Right.
But these are kind of a small section of few of the films you can
Right,
see. Yeah.
right. Can we have the clip in a few minutes or in a few seconds, if you can? Can we? The first film that you made was sometime in 1980s.
79 called
79.
Purbo London.
Uh-huh.
It was a short film basically.
Right.
It was on a life of a young Bengali boy. A day's life on a young Bengali boy called Purbo London. I followed his journey and how
Right.
what he's doing, and what he does in his spare time. And
In one day.
One day.
Just
yeah.
one day.
Yeah, that's Purbo London.
Because some of the very famous and great films, they talk about only one day.
Yeah, exactly. Or even tiny fragments of life, you
Yeah.
can make a big
Right.
film, 3 hours film, just kind of concentrating.
It just depends on the treatment, the director, how he sees things.
Yes, how he sees and what he wants to talk about.
What was the Purbo
London.
London was about?
It's
Just that a boy's
Yeah, I mean it's like one of us.
a day in the life of
Yeah, basically the way we spent our life.
Right,
A lot of people in those days used to work in the garment industry.
Right.
By the way, right at the beginning of my time, I also did work in clothing industry. So
Right.
it was all over East End in a lot of clothing. So all the youths,
Right.
they used to work in clothing, tailoring factories.
Right.
So I covered as a young Bengali boy, and he's kind of working in the clothing factory, and what does he do in his spare time and his dream and aspiration. So he basically talked about
the
that.
harsh realities of life.
Life, yeah. So I captured that, kind of a 15 minutes film called Purbo London.
What was the response?
Response basically at that time, of course, that film was shown by the Whitechapel Art Gallery, and there many places it went. But what was the greatest response when I showed to Channel 4? They said, "Which film school did you go? It looks like a graduation film." I said, "I never been to film school. I'd like to go to film school." Of course, at that time I applied to film school, and I failed to kind of enter into film school, National Film and Television School. So they said, "Do you have any other ideas? You are a perfectly professional filmmaker." And I says, "Yes." So they asked me to submit few more ideas.
Right.
So that and the next film which I did, Flame in My Heart, a documentary, half-an-hour documentary for Channel 4. That was my first broadcast film in 1983. And what is really kind of...
Can we have that, just one clip or one part of that before the break?
I love the East End. The East End markets like Petticoat Lane and Whitechapel. We're always in Whitechapel. And Bethnal Green. It's home now and I just love it. When I'm with my mum and my sister, I love going to Green Street because the whole atmosphere is so, it's just brilliant. The vibe, the kind of, you know, the Indian music and the smell of Indian and the lovely, gorgeous, expensive dresses.
For over 8,000 years, the region of Bengal has been united by its language and its culture. Bengal has been ruled by many emperors, Buddhists, Hindus, and in the 13th century, Turkish and Mughal invaders, bringing with them the Islamic faith. The majority of Bangladeshis living in Britain today are Muslims, although there are also Hindu, Buddhist, and Christian Bangladeshis.
About my films.
Okay, we will have to stop here, and then when we come back, we might as well see the remainder of the clip. It's a fascinating journey of yours, watching so many clips and of so many films. Just tell me something about, you have made so many films. What was this about this movie Wala?
Movie Wala, basically, one of the things, if you kind of look at the mainstream television here, often you will see a lot of representation about Indian cinema.
Yes.
They used to show, I don't know whether nowadays, and I don't really watch very much, but they used to show series of Hindi cinema, then kind of a lot of talks about Bollywood and all that.
Yes.
And I was sitting here, I said, oh my God, I came from a country which is a rich heritage of cinema.
Yes.
We grew up, sort of like made more than 100 films. We produced wonderful filmmaker, I'm talking about early, before the liberation.
Right.
And nobody knows, the world doesn't know anything about our cinema, that heritage, and these wonderful filmmakers, like Johir Khan Atta, Subhash Dutto, and
But you're talking about the people who were,
Yeah.
rather who are. Well, in the next segment, inshallah, we'll talk about...
We'll talk about that, yeah.
We can talk about that. This movie, wala, you
So basically, I thought of covering a documentary on the history of Bangladesh cinema, basically, history of the Bangladesh film. So I went to Channel 4, and they basically were so...
that was sometime in 1993, isn't it?
No, 91. 91. And
it had two parts.
No, one part.
Part
Movie
one?
Wala is one part.
Movie Wala is one part.
One part. I mean, of course, in the television series they had many other films,
Right.
but it was part of a series of films, So on my film was half an hour, 35mm film.
Right.
And 30 minutes film. And that film kind of, I went there to cover the history of cinema. But what I found, many people in Bangladesh couldn't speak English, in the industry basically, FDC.
Right. Right.
I did talk to the star and, performer.
Things have not
maker.
changed much. Things have not changed much.
I think the young filmmaker are, very much equipped, But in those days, I'm talking
Yeah.
in 91.
Yeah.
I did meet them and I said, okay, I'm making a documentary, this is the subject matter. You'll talk about your film and all the industry and the great heritage. And I found, it's extremely difficult for them to speak English.
Right.
Then I decided to change my idea. So I took a rickshaw puller and observed him, and he talked about...
Thank you very much. We'll have to take a break, and then when we come back, we'll talk about this rickshaw puller and his story. Thank you guys for being with us. We are going to take a break, and when we come back, we'll continue with our very interesting discussion with our distinguished guest today, Mr. Ruhul Amin, filmmaker. Okay, thank you.
আপনারা দেখছেন টকিং পয়েন্ট, সৌজন্যে মাহবুব এন্ড কো অ্যাকাউন্টেন্টস। আপনারা দেখছেন টকিং পয়েন্ট, সৌজন্যে মাহবুব এন্ড কো অ্যাকাউন্টেন্টস।
Welcome back. Before the break, we were talking to Mr. Ruhul Amin. He's a London-based filmmaker. Mr. Ruhul Amin, we were talking about the different clips that we saw about some of your films. Obviously, you have made so many, 15, 16 films, and we can't show all. But some of the films, I understand, they have won you awards. Could you tell us which awards and which film?
Basically, a kind of English at that time became critically
What is a kind of English?
Basically, the title kind of, in Bengali, the name, there are two names. In Bengali, I did call Bilater Mukh Ami Dekhiyechi.
Acha.
Of course, I took from that famous poet, Banglar Mukh Ami Dekhiyechi. But it's kind of turned slightly ironic, Bilater Mukh Ami Dekhiyechi. A kind of English, these are the people who community grew around here. They spoke English, but a kind of English, not fully English.
What is like pidgin English?
Pidgin English, yeah. So kind of that idea kind of derived from that ideology. Now that film became critically very successful, which is I was very fortunate.
This
that,
was shown on
London Film Festival and went to many other film festivals, even went to America and Australia, and it got sold. Channel 4 sold to many other countries. We went to Germany. I was invited to German Film Festival. And I was very delighted, of course, it's not a film of that caliber, I would say. So the critic compared with early work of Satyajit Ray and Disika. Of course, these are, I have to born few times to become Satyajit Ray. And of course, Disika, a great filmmaker.
Well, self-assessment is always very difficult, so you cannot judge yourself.
No, but
it's always the others who do that. But in the meantime, could we have the clip, please? Could you please run it so that when we are talking about, we could, our viewers can share what we are talking about?
প্রণাম পণ্ডিত মশাই। জয়স্তু জয়স্তু
blind, eh?
Go for first blind.
আমি তাড়াতাড়ি করুন
1 minute, sir. Intern.
তুই সবার কাছে প্রমাণ করতে চাইছো যে আমি আমার সংসার চালাতে পারি না, তাই না?
বলো, তুমি বলো, কি সত্যি চালাতে পারছো তুমি?
না না না, আমি তোমাকে কিছুতেই ফ্যাক্টরিতে কাজ করতে দেব না।
আপনার কি করলেন ভাই? আমার প্লেটগুলো ভেঙে ফেললেন। আমার পয়সা দিয়ে যান, আমার পয়সা দিয়ে যান।
দেখেই একটা শান্তি পাই, সারাদিন খাটনি করি যে সারা 6 টাকার বিনিময়ে কয়েকটা ড্যান্স দেখলাম, কয়েকটা মারপিট দেখলাম, এর জন্য আমার কাছে খুবই ভালো লাগে। তখন আমি শরীরে কেমন যেন একটা মনে করি যে আমার শরীরের ভিতরে কিছু বোধ আছে।
Life through the eyes of this rickshaw puller.
Yes.
What made you make this film, this movie wala and this?
As I was saying, it was sort of like every day you sit here and you see mainstream TV bombarding with kind of Hollywood, Bollywood films, and as a Bengali here, and you came from a great heritage of cinema, produced a lot of masterpieces and wonderful filmmaker, but nobody knows. Of course, I mean, this is one way center of the world.
Nobody knows and not many people care.
Exactly. So as a kind of Bengali came from that roots, and of course I wouldn't say that I don't love English film. I'm part and parcel of the society.
Right.
But at the same time, it kind of haunts you, where you came from and what is this heritage, you carry through.
Right.
And so I decided to do a documentary on the history of Bangladesh cinema. I went to Dhaka, done a lot of research and all that. The only thing I found problematic that not many people could speak English. So then I decided to do a film from the point of view of a rickshaw puller who watches these movies.
Right.
And he was so excellent, kind of, I followed him, his daily life, and he was talking about why he sees a film and what the spirit he gets out of a film. And that film got an award in Hawaii Film Festival.
Great.
So
you also made a film, it's a documentary on Bangladesh film industry, isn't it?
Yeah, this is
the one.
This is the one.
And then you also made another one, Life is a Train and Violent Earth.
Violent Earth.
Briefly, can you tell us something about that?
Life It's a train. It's about it's about the people's health situation. The film kind of depicts the bad diet and which causes heart disease. So it's a kind of an analytical film.
Is it based in Bangladesh or in this country?
No, it's in this country. You know, our kind of daily lifestyle. You know, how it causes, you know, the severe disease,
that is a serious concern, particularly in East London.
East London, yeah, exactly. And a lot of people are kind of suffering from the disease, you know, diabetes and heart disease. So that's a particularly a film.
And what was Violent Earth about?
Violent Earth is about, that film was done for Discovery Channel, Discovery America.
Right.
So they came to me and said, why don't you do a film on Bangladesh flood? And I got extremely furious. They phoned me from America and said, we heard about you, you make
Why were you furious?
Furious because it's another film on the disaster and famine and all that. And I said, you want
it's natural.
No, but I said, you want another film, and why me? You know, there are other films, so why don't you go and do it? They said, okay, hold on. It's not about disaster and famine. It's about how people cope aftermath of flood.
Right.
And you are the right person to do it. I said, okay, that sounds good. What exactly you want? This is recently the flood occurring everywhere on earth.
Right.
But people cannot cope. It's only the country, the people of Bangladesh, can cope after the flood. And I said, okay, that's something very wonderful.
Yes. We have a very good disaster management.
Not only that, you know, the ordinary people, they know how to cope. They live on water, they survive on water.
There's a saying that they live by water and they die by water. I would like to move to this, the great film that you're engaged with right now, Hason Raja. What inspired you, again, the same question, see, to go into this big, epic film?
This is basically, it's a discovery for myself. As a Bangladeshi, I want
you have Mithun Chakraborty and Raima
and a lot of wonderful performers
Murad,
from Bangladesh. Arman Murad, you know, and then Hason Raja, Shamima Tusti, Bakar Bokul, then many other people, Mamun Bai.
Right, you started this project some time ago.
Yeah, long time ago, about 10 years back.
Right.
But because of the funding situation, it took me a long time to kind of start. But
where do we stand today?
Today, it's more than 50% is done. Within the next couple of months, the rest of the film will be completed.
Inshallah.
And then it will take another 3 months to edit. So by middle of next year, the film would be completed.
Inshallah.
So it took me, because it's that same thing.
It's based on the life of the famous rural poet
Hason Raja. Hason Raja. And I wanted to kind of learn the rural life of people. So I thought this is a project through which I can go and research and meet people and learn about our great folklore. Especially, you know that, I mean, we have a great tradition of folklore.
Right.
I wanted to learn about Bangladesh and its history and heritage and culture. And I thought I have to start kind of with the rural. And Hason Raja was the right kind of subject. Of course, when I started, nobody ever made that film.
Right.
So I thought this is a film, I mean, it's waiting to be made.
So no film has been made on the life of...
No, when I started about 12 years back,
right.
Nobody ever made a film. Soon after I started, another film was made.
Right.
But I haven't given up because this is an epic film.
Right.
It's a co-production between UK, India and Bangladesh.
Right.
And it has got, you know, kind of many epic scenes, and music director is Bapila.
You were recently in India to do some work on that?
Some work on that.
What were you doing?
I was shooting all these indoor. Indoor was done, and the action sequence is done, and then 2-3 songs are done.
Right.
You know, so
Right.
a lot of work was done. It's mostly indoor.
Right.
And yes, this is a kind of epic venture, a co-production, and this is something which, for the first time for the industry of Bangladesh, a film done in that nature.
Yes.
And also very proud to be, you know, the finance is coming from here, a lot of people contributing from here, the community, local people. And
what are your future plans?
I have also written another script called Scent of Earth, which is kind of on mixed race. You know, a lot of people used to have mixed marriages, and their children, you know, kind of partly Bengali, partly English, you know, a subject on that, and and also kind of I want to make
this is
another
very
film.
closer to real life, isn't it?
Real life here, and also I want to make another film on Radha Raman and Karim, you know, another two legendary folk poet, you know.
Right, right.
And then of course I want to do another film on Dhaka, you know, just calling, started kind of talking to a writer, you know, the city of Dhaka. You know, want to kind of present
that would be another very interesting film, I'm sure.
Of course, you know, we want to present to the world, you know, the great kind of upcoming city in the world, you know.
Mr. Ruhul Amin, like in life, we also have to set things in some sort of limitations, so we are running out of time. And it was a pleasure having you here with us and talking to you about your aspirations, hopes, and hopefully we will be able to have a view of the film very soon, Hason Raja, inshallah. Thank you very much for being with us. It was a pleasure.
Very pleased.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, viewers, for being with us, and I hope that you have enjoyed the show as much as we have. And same time, same channel, next week, we'll see you. Thank you.